season starts here, the Vancouver Boat Show.
All right, time to get going. Welcome to the VIBS, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you here. So during this session, if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, please contact me, your moderator, in the chat window, and I'll be helping you in any way that I can remotely from where I am. So also in the meantime, while the presentation is going on, if you think of any questions, feel free to just put them into the Q&A box, and we'll be reading out all the Q&A postings after the presentation. So that gets us into a good shape to get started here. It is a great pleasure to present to you Liza Copeland with Dreaming of Caribbean Cruising.
Okay, well, Bobby, thank you very much. Now I'm unmuted. Anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome to the virtual show. And you just look at that picture. Wouldn't you just love to climb on board now and go off cruising in the Caribbean? We're fortunate we've done an awful lot of it, which is what I want to share with you today. So here we go. So if you're going to sail from Vancouver, you'll be going down the coast. It's about 5,500 miles. Unfortunately, we got the Oregon coast first, which is a tricky part. It's about 750 miles to San Francisco. And so you need to really watch weather for that. But after that, again, watching weather, you have a pretty easy and a lot of it pretty windless ride. So you get down and you have to go through the Panama Canal. And if you ever get a chance to do this, because you do need 5 people on board every yacht, so friends may need line handlers, it's really worth doing it. It takes usually a yacht 2 days. And you can go through many ways, either tied to other yachts, or you can go in and tied to a barge. Now, in the uplots from the Pacific, they're sort of 2 and 1 together. So you get your lines ashore, and you'll be behind the big ships. So you need to be careful when they start their propellers again. Then you'll go across the flooded lake and probably spend the night on the other side with all the howler monkeys at night and the parrots in the morning and wonderful jungle noises. And then you'll go down into the Caribbean and you'll be in front of the yacht then, and you kind of look down 3 locks together, and there you are in this wonderful Caribbean. So the Caribbean is just an area you could spend many, many years cruising. It's got many islands, many nationalities. We have high islands, which are the newer and tend to be the bigger islands, and the low islands, some of which you can sail around. The creme de la creme has always been the windwards and leewards, which are the islands down here to the east. The reason being the winds in the sailing season, which is normally considered to be the beginning of December. And now the insurance companies say to the end of May, used to say end of June, but we seem to have a lot of hurricanes happening. Then you have the winds coming from the east, maybe a bit northeasterly, that tends to be at the beginning of the season, southeasterly at the end, but by and large, they're predominantly east. So you can imagine if you're on the lee side of the island on the west, you have these great calm seas and these wonderful winds. But all the areas, whether you come along the south coast, or the north coast rather of South America. Unfortunately, Venezuela is still off bounds at the moment. Their government is not hospitable. Aruba, Curacao, and Baja though are fine. Colombia's opened up for cruising and is absolutely wonderful. And then you get into the area with Panama, the San Blas Islands, and coming round the Bay Islands of Honduras, the Rio Dulce River of Guatemala, Belize, and the wonderful diving, and all the way round. Now, because of this wind, and because wind drives current, you get, particularly in the lower Caribbean, unbelievably strong currents. So always be very careful swimming in the Caribbean. You can have a 3-knot set to the west. We, I think, had our very best day of sailing probably coming up here. And of course, it's all coming up into the Caribbean, this water. And we did 219 nautical miles in a day. Well, let me tell you, for a 40-footer, that's not bad. Or day and night, of course, that's 24 hours. So just to keep in mind that your winds come round and your currents come round. So this area can become a bit of a washing machine. So if you are doing the circuit, and of course you never want to go this way because interwind is pretty untenable with those strong winds you get, particularly in the lower Caribbean. Often 20, 25 knots. So this area that can get quite rough, you probably want to do in the change of the seasons. That would be May and probably late November. And go up, and then this will become the Gulf Stream, and it'll take you up, and of course ends up in Europe. Making this the Yucatan Passage can be quite tricky. So the summer is, the summer up north is wonderful to go home. And of course, the winter is the perfect destination for the Caribbean. And a lot of people will keep their boats down there. Fortunately, this area down here is out of the hurricane belt. So Chaguaramas in Trinidad is a popular place to leave a boat. And also Grenada. And Grenada had Ivan a few years ago where a lot of boats were damaged. So now you have to pin your boats down in the yard, but they're basically the insurance. And there are various yards up the island chain where they will approve you leaving your boat. So let's get cruising. So if you go south from the Panama Canal, you're into these very unique San Blas Islands. And I live in Vancouver, and San Juan, someone was just talking to me about the San Juans. So San Blas Islands, and these are about 365 little motus, some of them bigger islands. Some are quite densely populated with wonderful sand swept roads and lovely palm frond huts to live in. They have these great sailing boats, and they're populated by the Cunha Indians, who make these unique mola blouses, they're called. And a lot of people make these into wall hangings. They are, of course, quite a short people, and matriarchal society, incidentally. And this woman's making me a bracelet, and it comes out in a perfect geometric design. And so a friend took the picture above of the family, because when we set out cruising, which ended up in a circumnavigation, our youngest, Jamie, in the middle there was 2. I think he's just 3 in that picture. And our friend said, "Oh, I haven't used this underwater camper." Click. And this became our signature image of still just afloat. Going down many different little islands you visit, and you end up in Cartagena, the very best of all the Spanish cities in the Caribbean. Absolutely wonderful. You can leave your boat here too if you want while you go home for the summer. And all these squares at night become full of tables and chairs and buskers and music. Quite a delight. So that's going south. But what if you want to come north? And of course, you are going into current, and you need to keep that in mind. So if you're going north, you can go and cruise some of Panama. And then there's some islands here that belong to actually Colombia, San Andreas and Provence. And come up. There are a lot of atolls you can stop at, and you get to these Bay Islands of Honduras. Quite interesting, because for a long time they were more British than Spanish. Honduras is Spanish speaking. And the reason they were British speaking was way back when the sugar plantations closed, particularly in St. Vincent, back in the Windwards and Leewards, the locals had no jobs, so they got into boats, they floated down on those currents, and many of them ended up in these Bay Islands of Honduras, and they which are very high volcanic islands, so they built houses on stilts. These islands now, Guanaja, Roatan and Utila, are known for diving. They're the end of this wonderful reef, second only to Australia, that goes down from Belize. And then you get to Guatemala and this wonderful Rio Dulce River and the lovely islands, 3 offshore atolls in Belize, 1 in Mexico, the only ones in the Northern Hemisphere, and up to the Yucatan, Mexico. So here we go, going out the Rio Dulce, and there's a bar at the edge of the river, and we draw 7 feet. And if you go in the afternoon and go in as the tide is going up, and it'll push the river flow back, you might get a few more inches. So if you're 6 feet, you'll get in okay. 6.5, you'll probably bump the sand. 7 feet, it's pretty difficult. So we had to heel ourselves way over on our side, and I mean way over. So we put a lot of water weights in the dinghy and pulled the boat over with our dinghy. So locals wanted to help us, and they towed us into the mud, so we sent them away and got in by ourselves. You clear in and you go up the Rio Dulce, and we went up early in the morning, all the kids in their canoes, all the parrots everywhere, these beautiful homes going up the river. And from there you're in Fronteras, and you can, we actually flew to Tikal, and you can go and see. So we're now in the Ruta Maya, they call it, the route of all the Mayan ruins. Antigua is an old Spanish town, absolutely magnificent, a volcano that sometimes goes poof. So be careful if you're going to climb it, get there and make sure it's not going to go off that day. But it's a magnificent town to wander around and be part of. You can go up to Lake Atlan. Interesting, they have the religion. So with their own religion, they had nowhere to go. And so you find the Mayans gods in the Catholic Church, because the Catholics had no people to fill their churches, no population. So it's to us very interesting going into a Catholic church with Mayan images all the way down the side. But for them, it seems to meld just perfectly. The wonderful highland markets, Chichicastenango, isn't that a marvelous name? Nice to arrive the night before and see everyone coming in from the hills and setting up their wares. And then it all starts very early in the morning. Belize is just wonderful. It's got a series of reefs going off, an inner reef and an outer reef. The outer reef is quite tricky to navigate. There's often 10-foot draft between the 2 long sets of reefs, so you have to watch carefully. Beautiful, beautiful diving. A lot of the reefs are protected, so anyone who wants to catch fish or use a spear gun needs to look at the areas very carefully. A beautiful little zoo you can go to too. Wonderful, wonderful fishing in this part of the world where you're allowed to fish. These great big lobster, crab, and we certainly had a wonderful time there. This is navigating, again, drawing 7 feet. We always had someone up on the bow, and it's these coral heads, bommies they're called, and you have to watch really, really carefully. The outer reef is often just little keys like this one, lovely to go for the day. But for the night, you need to go into the inner reef where it's mangroves, and you always find a safe anchorage, and you get the dugongs, which are related to elephants. Going up to the Yucatan, you get really into the Mayan ruins. And actually, this bottom one here is in Belize. And my grandchildren came to stay, step-grandchildren, and they were 7 and 5 at the time. And this was a perfect mini Mayan ruin for them. But when you get up to the Yucatan, you get into Mayan and Toltec, and one worshipping the rain god and one the sun god. And because you can see, they have very different architecture. Now up to Isla Mujeres, and we're pushing weather here, and these brilliant sunsets are always a reminder we should be getting north. And everyone gathers in Isla Mujeres waiting. We went to Cuba, being Canadians, Americans, all having to get the route up. And of course, you always want wind with current, and you've got that huge set of the current going north. So here we go. So after there, I mean, Cuba's magnificent to go to. I'm not really going to cruise Cuba a lot today, but they're always wooing me with emails saying, come back, and it will soon be all over and you will be able to. Very interesting. We were first there actually when it was still communist, but Russia had failed, and so they had no money. And now it's beginning to thrive and certainly becoming small business enterprises that were never there before. you can come down. Now, most boats who are coming down from the States, of course, will come through the Bahamas. And that's their nurturing ground, quite expensive, $300. Even if you're there a couple of days, actually, you might, I think if you go to Bimini for the weekend, you can pay less. But if you're going to cruise here for a couple of weeks, you're going to pay your $300. And then they come down and they would come to the Turks and Caicos, and then come down to the Dominican Republic, stopping at Luberon, Puerto Plata, Samaná. The trouble is you're then into the trades, and of course these trades are coming down. So this is a pretty, it's called the thorny passage, rough north coast. So if you're coming around to the Caribbean this way, of course you get the calmer seas because the wind is hitting the lands first. And you also, so it's a great way to come down. So we came one time down this lower route and went into the Cayman Islands, and then came down to Jamaica, stopped at Haiti, believe it or not. There's a very hospitable place everyone stops at, cruised the Dominican Republic, a fascinating country, on to Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. This trip has the advantage, the Mona Passage, which is an overnight trip. Also can be quite rough, but the main problem is this off the northeast coast of DR. So actually, if you're coming down from Florida, you only have 4 overnight trips. This is an overnight, or if you, yes, coming down to Trinidad, only 4 overnight trips, which is pretty nice. Okay, so let's go on. This would be Cuba, Havana, and going north again. Jefferson built a brick which was actually obsolete before it was completed, but it's a marvelous anchorage, not still in the tropics. But Cuba is fascinating to go to when you have the chance. Coming down to the Caymans, I was surprised, no high rises. It looks very Caribbean. And you can go to Stingray City Sandbar. So Andy was quite taken aback. I paid for boat ride tickets. He said, we're on a boat, we have a dinghy, we even have a kayak. And why are you paying to go on a boat trip? But of course, they know where to go, and they feed the stingrays. And actually, their stingray comes and gives you a cuddle. But we're told very clearly where the sting is and never to get behind the stingray, and all is well. It was actually an amazing experience. On to Jamaica, an absolutely wonderful markets there, and this woman, they're very vibrant people, but they're quite in your face in Jamaica, and you have to be quite strong-willed. But you're running into a lot of fruit and vegetables that you don't get in the markets here. You've got Christophine, which you need to peel underwater because they're papain, your skin will peel with them, and you've got soursop, most other things. So you've got these finger bananas, which are full of flavor. They're absolutely marvelous. But there will be more and more things you don't recognize. So you just ask. There are a lot of root vegetables in the Caribbean. They tend to be quite flowery, and you need to add a lot of butter, salt, pepper, hot sauce, whatever else to actually get some flavor from them. This is in Montego Bay, and I felt for them the local market was going downhill. There was a tourist market by the cruise ship base, and this guy wanted not even $200 for this beautiful carving. And I was going to go back the next day, but a squall came through and the opportunity passed by. But what a magnificent piece. We were lucky, a friend of my son's mother's is half Jamaican, and she happened to be down and invited us to a book festival. So off we went, and of course they were serving jerk chicken, and they were all dressed so colorfully. I mean, it was interesting. It was on a Saturday, and a lot of them were going to church. So a lot of people in the Caribbean are Seventh-day Adventists, so they church on Saturday. And then along to this beautiful little marina, which we just loved. George was great running it. It was picture perfect, gorgeous gardens as you went out to the town, and you could go down there on one of these long rafts all the way down the river there. It was fantastic. But we were glad it was sort of only mid-tide. It was a 3. You could see a lot of rafts high and dry when they hadn't made it. So now on to Haiti. So we'd been told about this Île Vache, and this is a little island where they're very hospitable to yachts, mainly because some French cruisers came here and they found their paradise and they built a hotel. So everyone's out fishing, and it was quite sad how few fish were left. And even in the reefs there, they've really fished everything out. So we're just about to anchor, and the local kids come along, and I say, "Oh, could you just keep back a bit while we're anchoring?" And they say in perfect English, because of course they speak French here, "Oh, we would never interfere with people who are anchoring." Anyway, they came alongside, and they have to go to the mainland for school, and they have to pay for it. So they're all into making money. And they had some really good suggestions. It was no, give us money, as can happen. It was just basically, oh, we can do this and we can do that. And so they were on our boat for a lot, and they always planned their visits if they weren't around meal time. So they got fed well too. But it was just delightful getting to know them. There was a Canadian boat who was doing Schools Beyond Borders. So I went out with them to meet the local minister and his wife, who's headmistress of this school, and hear the kids. They're absolutely lovely. So the plan was to get them to write to kids in Canada and get the parents, Canadian parents, involved and help make a donation. So I do hope they're going on being successful. And here we are. You can cruise the coast beautifully and come to San Jose in the Dominican Republic, and onto a lovely little anchorage called Boca Chica, where there's a marina, half owned by a local and an American. And oh, there were little seahorses. You don't often see them in the water. Is Colin visiting, and he was absolutely fascinated by them. Local town souvenirs, mainly for locals, and you get the amber, you get the cigars, of course, the Larimar, the Turkish, which is only found in DR, or sadly quite expensive now. Lots of fishing, and this is a mahi-maki, or dolphin fish. It has different names. It's really sparkly when you catch them. And our way of fishing, you might have heard me yesterday, is a few drops of alcohol on the gills, pop them upside down in the bucket. You can see Andy's got it on the gaff here. And then they might flap again and the gills will be opened, 2 more squirts, and you totally anesthetize them into oblivion, and they sort of get a smile on their face, and they're marinated for dinner. So all good. Fishing in the Caribbean is just putting out a line behind the boat. You don't have to reduce speed. And but you do have to pull the fish in quickly. And here's poor Chris, the 7-year-old, who was so slow. The sharks always got the body first. He even went back to school in Tawasin. And I said, I know for a fact, I've seen it. No fish in Belize have bodies. They only have heads. Anyway, you can see we catch some big fish at times. Try not to, actually, because you don't want to waste them. And our freezer's not huge. But the alcohol trick works on those too. So coming round, you've got the Virgin Islands, very popular for chartering and very busy normally, January, February, March. Be warned if you're there on your own boats, there are a lot of mooring balls, and it's hard to find a good anchorage often. Spanish Virgins first, Culebra and Vieques, and they used to be a lot military, so they're relatively recently opened up. Then you've got the American and the British Virgin Islands. Basically, that most of the sailing is the British Virgin Islands, because they've got this beautiful area down the middle where you get the lovely trade winds, but you don't get the big seas. So there's great diving in all these Ginger, Cooper and Peter Island, Norman Island. The Jos van Dyke is always full of beans with Foxy. I don't know how ancient Foxy is, but I think he was around 2 years ago, because I haven't been down there recently to check him out. Tortola and Virgin Gorda. And Virgin Gorda is where the Bitter End Yacht Club is. That was totally decimated, but they're pretty well building it back now. It's not quite open yet. So great cruising. Very, I would say, American oriented. So it's very easy to get around, and it's good for every level in that you can go out during the day, and people who want the anchorages where they can just go snorkeling, get them. But for the people who want to kind of jump up, that's to a steel band, that night, there's somewhere to go to, and in great easy proximity. So here is looking down at the islands. They're very picturesque. Towns are very picturesque. After the hurricane there 3 years ago, I actually saw a catamaran up on the roof of this one. Amazing. And here's the Better End as it was. And I think they're trying to build it back as to be the same. Beautiful diving. and lots of turtles as well. So then you have to do the Anegada Passage, which you're going to do a good overnight trip. And again, you're dead into wind. So often people just try and go at night, spend more time at night because the winds ease up, or wait till the wind goes north or south. So you've got a bit of a slant on it, and then you get across. And Anguilla basically is a reef. The Anegada is a reef, and then you get to these group of lower islands, Anguilla, St. Martin, and St. Bart's, all of which you can sail around. And St. Bart's, can you sail around? Maybe not, but you can certainly Anguilla and St. Martin. They're much visited islands. A lot of cruise ships go from there, so they're tourist oriented, but they're really fun to visit as well. These are what Chris Doyle, who writes a lot of the cruising guides, calls the islands, these lower islands, the islands in the clouds. They're very steep to islands. They put mooring buoys down now. Sabre, particularly so. Sabre's airport's interesting. It's quite short, but it's an international, and it's open to the sea at both ends. And they have the road that could never be built. But a local finally designed it, and it joins the towns that I think are called Winwood and the Bottom. Fascinating to go to. Statia, wonderful walks in the crater there. St. Kitts used to have a lot of sugar, still makes beer. Nevis again, a high island, often in the clouds, great walks. Montserrat, wow, volcano blew most of Montserrat away in about 20 years ago now, and it's still smoldering. So not much of the whole of the big town where there were many expats and a big American medical school all blown away. So when you come down St. Mark's, you've got Barbuda and Antigua, and Barbuda is pretty much not much populated. Actually, all the people are descendants of one family, the Codringtons, but absolutely spectacular diving. And then you get to Antigua. And Antigua's, whereas St. Martin and Antigua are two big centres for yachting. Antigua, of course, has got the dockyard. So St. Bart's, Antigua, if you go directly, is about 90 miles. Antigua to Guadeloupe's 42. And particularly if you go to the west side of it, which you probably would. Anguilla is a big sand island. They're interesting. They were given their independence by the Brits, but after 3 years, they said, this is far too much work. We want to come back. The other islands are mostly independent, the British ones, but they I think for security and some things they're under Britain, but they operate independently. So this is interesting. We went to clear in here, and there were two boats on the shore banging together. So when I went to clear customs, I said, the fenders have fallen down between them. Can I move them apart? And she said, no, don't touch. Anyway, I went to the local bar on the beach, and I said, what's the story? These two boats had come in. They'd both been abandoned, totally different places in the Atlantic. One had a rudder issue, the other had a broken mast, you could see that, and they were both insurance claims. They had both arrived at the entrance to this bay at exactly the same moment and kind of sailed in together and ended up nestling on the beach. Well, you can imagine with the local voodoo, which is called Obeah, what that meant. So people were pretty spooky about these two boats, quite remarkable. So this says it all about St. Martin. St. Martin is very much a tourist island divided into French and Dutch. There's not much of a division on land. In fact, you can go anywhere. And you go anywhere in your dinghy. But if you clear your boat in on one side, you have to stay there. And on the French side, you have to stay there. The French side's got a big marina. And there's a huge lagoon you can go into where you have to go in through locks, opening bridges. And Philipsburg is duty-free. And it's quite aggressive, or you can go to Marigot and up at Marigot, and you can go to air-conditioned shops. I'll just go back to this beer, which I mentioned before. This is the lager that everyone seems to like. It's made in St. Kitts and Trinidad, and you will find it throughout the Caribbean, but it is duty-free here. So we get on to St. Bart's, land for rich and famous, Mick Jagger and the like, but absolutely charming to go through, a Swedish heritage. And wow, it's a delight. In this picture, you see a lot of large yachts, and the bucket regattas in. You have to be over 100 feet long to take part. And this is the big boat. Wow. Antigua Race Week. I've never seen it as busy as this. It actually was taken in 2007. And we're up at Shirley Heights. And you can look down and see the dockyard in the middle, Nelson's dockyard. And of course, there's lots of history here, all dating back to the mid 1700s. And a lot of the buildings that stand now were built in the mid 1800s. And this is what you will be doing probably on every Sunday evening to the steel band, drinking your rum punches and watching the sun go down. And of course, there's the green flash in the Caribbean, but you need really to be on the look at the ocean for that. And this green flash is remarkable. It does exist, but some people can't see it, I gather. And it can, just as the sun hits the horizon, the last color to be refracted is green. You get this big green, actually oval, brilliant oval on the horizon, and it goes. But it has to be absolutely clear, the horizon, and always at the last minute there seems to get a cloud there. But I've seen it. I've gone up and down on waves and seen the same one 3 times. And something to boast about, of course. Here is the dockyard and all these great buildings. Andy, my husband, lived here for a long time, and he actually worked out of the paymaster's office, lived in the library. We used to play, this is now a high-end hotel, but we used to play broom ball in it, and it's where the big yachts go, and absolute delight to wander through. Ticonderoga, an old classic. We were married aboard her actually in Martinique. And before the Classics Regatta, which is the end of April, it happened to be our wedding anniversary. So we were invited by Tom. You can see he's very stressed before the racing on the floor here, on the deck. And we went off. And you can usually get on a boat during Classics, and it's just not to be missed. And then it's followed by Antigua Race Week, and Andy was one of the founders of that. So I'm given the helm for the finish. We win. I've got nothing to do with it, but it was kind of grand. Lots of locals come in and do the dancing, and of course the typical locals. Now, there's no doubt that as you cruise the Caribbean, there will be places you get boat boys who are aggressive too, who want you to give money. And so this is a really good way of sponsoring kids. And they're doing the run, they've got a concern, and this is just a great way of helping the locals out. Great Bird Island, Green Islands, I showed actually pictures of that yesterday. You just gather all these different nationalities. And I mean, yes, we've got a Canadian or Australian, we've got Zimbabwe, South Africa, we got American, we got British, we've got, my husband actually was born in Madrid, we've got Hong Kong. It's just amazing the fun you have. Guadeloupe, a bit of a hike to windward sometimes to get to Guadeloupe, 42 miles to go to day A. Absolutely charming in every way. They used to have to hike up the hill to clear in with customs, but customs have got fed up with hiking the hill themselves, so we now go to the local boutique. Only the French, you can say. It's one of the few places, along with Antigua, you clear in on the computer. The last time I was here, and there were 9 of us on board a cat that we chartered, and the French have 6 keys that are in a different position. You try typing 9 names and all their passport details. Oh, it drove me nuts. Anyway, don't come in at night. I mean, this particular Harbour de Aix has lots of fish pots down, but there are very few aids to navigation in the Caribbean. And despite there being French islands, they do all follow the American system of red right returning, but you're not going to find very many. So the rule is, unless you're doing an offshore passage off the coast, just don't try getting into anchorages at night. Again, the French, well, they're departments of France. They get all the same handouts as Paris or La Rochelle. So they cultivation all is very sophisticated. They cultivate different climate levels. Guadeloupe's 2 islands, a high island and a low island. The low island's called Grand Island. It always amuses us. A wonderful place to visit. And the Saints. So the Saints has this little population, and they were big into whaling in the days of old, and their population was declining. So they got quite worried because there was a lot of inbreeding. And I remember when I first went here, the kids had big sort of fey eyes, starry eyes. So they did what only the French would do. They gave the Navy, the French Navy, shore leave every night for 3 months, and they soon rejuvenated the population. It's a charming place to visit with wonderful French boutiques and wonderful French restaurants, but you're very much Caribbean. A poor Dominica is a pretty poor British island, very high, very lush forest, rainforest, kind of sandwiched between two French islands. And there was a lot of English, French, and Spanish bashing in the Caribbean, and they were very careless with their cannons. But history is very interesting as you wander around. The Caribs, they always call them the man-eating Arawaks. Anyway, they have their own village now, and they tour you around. And then you are heading out of what they called the Leeward Islands. No one quite knows why. And these are the Windward Islands. And they extend from Martinique down to Grenada. Now, Antigua to Grenada is about 300 miles, just to give you an idea. So Martinique, another department of France, you got to St. Lucia, a very thriving tourist island, very British island. St. Vincent actually never had a good reputation, and the main town hasn't got a good anchorage. So people often don't stop very much and go to Bequia instead. These are the Grenadines, so half are owned by St. Vincent and half Grenada. So here we go, Mount Pelée in Martinique. The volcano blew in 1902, and the whole population, except the one guy in jail, was killed. It was really sad. Again, wonderful markets, absolutely gorgeous botanical gardens, and a great, you go to Windward side of Martinique as well. St. Lucia, this is Rodney Bay. Don't go in December. The Atlantic Valley for Cruises comes in. All the facilities you want, great marine stores. Marigot, absolutely gorgeous in daylight, but also magic at night. Coming down, very lush island. And a lovely little local restaurant we're here. My son is visiting, and just to point out, happy hour, it says, every day from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Not what they meant, but just to point out that rum is much cheaper than the mix here, and those rum punches are pretty powerful. Soufrière, lovely old town, and then you get the pitons, which cruisers try to climb, having been get yourself into a fitness routine first. Coming down, you have Wally-la-Bou Bay, which is in St. Vincent, and we just arranged, because friends were dropping a boat off close by, that to meet them here. And it's the set of the Pirates of the Caribbean. Of course, the two teenagers on board were delighted. And this was, I don't know, a few years ago, and they had even had the DVD with them. Bequia, a huge, huge harbour, absolutely great, wonderful restaurants, Calabash Hotel. Here we are with our rum punches and the kids with their Virgin One punches. But we jumped up a storm to the Rio Bland that night, and it was just gorgeous. Tobago Keys you have to go to, and the green turtles are there. Please don't hold them, but they are absolutely fascinating to swim with. Coming in, you see the hazards of the Caribbean, but you do have reefs. And if you sail into sun, you're not going to see them. But if you have the sun overhead or behind, you can see this dark water. And that's the reef. The lighter is the sand. Just avoid them. Too many people are just looking at instruments these days. And sometimes sandbars move, and the charting isn't always totally accurate. But looking out, you can see it on the water as plain as can be. And it always has a paper chart, just in case the electronics fail, because electronics are also good. These are the old trading boats, and let me tell you, Mike is right, don't get in their way. They're tourist boats now. Only real hazard in the Caribbean is manchineel trees, and they're very toxic. Don't stand under them in the rain or collect the wood or eat the apples particularly. Down in Grenada, it's the Spice Island, and just a wonderful market, a big lagoon, and a big marina there if you want to. It's quite hot and steamy, though, let me tell you, as the wind goes down. As you get further down, you also get much more wind. Tobago Keys can be quite windy. For those who want to leave their boat in Trinidad, there's some wonderful yards on the northeast coast in Chaguaramas Bay. Unfortunately, Trinidad is a bit of a sad island, unlike Tobago, although they're under the same jurisdiction, but there's a lot of money coming in from the oil rigs off Trinidad, and unfortunately a very greedy government. But they do put their heart and soul into Carnival. Carnival's somewhat inconveniently in February because we would all like to go down there before we lay up our boats, but it's really, really worth going for. And the locals will take you around very safely. You can go south of there to the Manamo River in Venezuela, one place which is pretty remote, and you can still go. You clear in independently. These scarlet ibises came in at dusk, and they completely covered the tree. It was just a magnificent sight. And all the other birds, the toucans, the parrots, frigate birds, and it's just all the boats around, the fishing boats. It's just wonderful. We even saw the Amazon pink dolphins here. Absolutely great. So laying up your boats, there's this is power boats, there's Cruise In. They do a great job. Make sure you take all your sails down, pick your dinghies off davits. You may have work done. Be sure to give very precise instructions about your batteries so they don't switches don't get turned on or turned off and drain the batteries. Traveling between the marinas or traveling into town on the bus, it's good to go in numbers or take a taxi. So now you're into the swoop. You can now sail on, although you don't want to go into Venezuela, which is such a shame. The great places to go and boatyards there. You can maybe do the islands, Les Havres, Les Roques, but be careful. And then you get to Bonaire, Curacao, and Aruba that are Dutch. And you can go on. And remember, you don't really want to do this unless you're at the end of the season in May or maybe the beginning in November. Just one word with currency, particularly in the English islands, they very often, if you're taking a taxi into town to get food, they'll say it's so much, it's so many dollars. And you think it's EC dollars, which is actually pegged to the US dollar, I think 2.667. And at the end of the ride, they say, oh no, we meant US. So absolutely be sure. And you can spend US dollars there, but you'll always get charged more. So it's local, worth getting local money, EC dollars. Funnily enough, used to be known as BB dollars, and you can do it at the bank. I mean, it's Caribbean, you can easily get money, you can easily get communications. It's very sophisticated, you easily get on the internet, all very sophisticated. Okay, so now you can start dreaming of Caribbean and many other places in the world to go, because wow, the Mediterranean's also very appealing. And of course, I've got books to help you do all that. I've just, during COVID, got them all on ebooks as well. Cruising for Cards is updated to the end. I did it at the end of 2020, so absolutely brand up to date. And it just covers everything you need to know about cruising, whether it's the boat and all the equipment, whether it's the lifestyle, the dangers, what about medical issues. It's all in there. I did a big session on provisioning, of course, that's all in there as well. Just cruising is when we started with the kids, only a 2-year plan then, just to go to the Med and Caribbean. And that kind of got extended on and on and on to, as I say, around the world. So just cruising is the Med, Caribbean, Eastern Caribbean, and then all the way across the South Pacific with Galapagos. Still cruising is off the beaten track, Indian Ocean around, Southern Atlantic, all of Africa, Asia, and finally finishing in the Caribbean. And comfortable cruising, we leave from Vancouver, end up in Nova Scotia. Very easy, often day hopping, and I've got all your route planning and weather. Great to be able to leave the boat, come home, and then go back down. So you can go on the boat show site, or you can go into my website and you go into aboutcruising.com. Be sure if you buy them on Amazon, buy on the Canadian site, because I've given much better prices in Canada than I have in the US. So I feel for Canadians having to pay more dollars. do go there. But meanwhile, I am open for the last 15 minutes for questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Liza. And we have a question coming from, let me see here, Cristobal saying, how much time should one consider to do the whole loop?
Oh, well, I don't know where you're coming from. I would spend a minimum of 2 years in the Caribbean. And of course, you might decide you're not going to stay there for the summer for hurricane season. You're going to go up north and down east, as they say, to Maine and Nova Scotia. And that's also magnificent cruising, I might say. Very, very different, of course, to the Caribbean. And then you can go back down again the next November. Or you might decide just to stay in that lower part of the Caribbean for the winter. But 2 years, but I would spend more. I mean, I have spent in my life, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years constantly, and many, many more years visiting long periods of time. And I still love going to the Caribbean, and I can still find many more new places to go to.
All right, thank you. And we have Howard raising his hand. Let me just open his audio. So Howard, if you unmute, we'll be able to hear you.
Oh. Are you talking to me or are you talking to him?
Oh, Howard, I'm talking to Howard. So Howard, there should be an unmute button right now in the center of your screen. If you click it, we'll be able to hear you. All right, we're not getting a response from Howard. So, oh, here it comes. Go ahead, Howard. Oh, no, we lost it. Oh, okay. All right. I think, yes, here's another question from Randy Singer. What sort of monthly budget should a cruising couple plan for while cruising the Caribbean?
Well, what an interesting question. I think you'll spend what you've got, quite frankly. I don't think you can cruise easily these days. If you're talking about Canadian dollars, I think you need at least $2,500 a month. It just depends what you want to do. If you like eating out a lot, are you going to eat in the very expensive restaurants by the water, or are you going to go to 1 or 2 streets back and eat with the locals? That will make a big difference. Are you going to take the local bus to cruise the islands, or are you going to get a tour? All those really add up. But you are looking to quite a few cruising fees these days. Incidentally, because every island is a different country, you have to both clear in, so that has to be your first stop at a port of entry to clear in, and your last stop also has to be a port of entry to clear out. And if you don't have the clearance paper from the island before, the next island doesn't want to see you. You do normally not have to pay for those, but some islands, some countries do require payment, and they will really vary. They may include health, they may include garbage, they may include number of people, they may have a time limit. And just because your friends yesterday had one rate doesn't mean to say you'll have the same today. It's just the way of the world. I don't know. I can't think of many countries that are different. If you want communications and you want expensive communications, that's going to cost you money. So budget is really dependent on your lifestyle, but I think the minimum I would consider in Canadian dollars would be 2,500.
Okay. Now we have one from Lisa Apple. She says, Liza was talking about sturgeon yesterday. It is legal to bring into Canada.
I was talking about what yesterday?
Sturgeon.
Oh, yes, Stugeron.
Okay.
Stugeron is absolutely legal to bring into Canada. It's an antihistamine. It's just very expensive to get a drug approved by the Canadian and American authorities. Well, basically, you get it approved by the American ones, and Canada will follow. It's the medicine of cruisers of the world. Absolutely everyone you talk to uses it. So unfortunately, basically, you'll have to wait till one of your friends or you travel either to an English-speaking country, or I don't know, they go to the Virgin Islands, or they go to Mexico, has it. But Cinarazine is the generic. So if you have Australian friends or South African, New Zealand friends, you can say Cinarazine, and they have a different brand name. So we're not into travel at the moment. So, but maybe you don't need your Slugeron at the moment, but I'm sure you'll find it easy to obtain when things get back to normal. Or you can just, if you're going to the Caribbean, of course, when you do fly down there, you're going to be able to buy it in any of the islands.
Okay, the next one is from Brigitte. She says, wonderful presentation. What piece of equipment on your boat do you cherish the most while cruising the Caribbean?
I cherish everything, you know. The moments you cherish are always, or so often, I won't say always, so often the unexpected. You know, you randomly meet people, which of course is the delight of cruising, or you randomly go to a restaurant and find the most, the great people running it, and you become really good friends with them, and you always go back to that restaurant, or a great market or a great theatre, whatever it is, great ancient site. It's just the randomness, the adventure of cruising that I love. And one of the hardest things for me to adapt when I came home was, I live in beautiful BC, and what better cruising can you have? It's as dramatic as it can be. But I knew it well. There was, and until we started going further north to the Broughtons and up to Rupert, then up to Alaska and the west coast of Vancouver Island, I knew it well. So I miss this spontaneity of cruising. And that to me, so I have random, wonderful memories, but I could say to another person, why don't you go back there? And to them, it would just be another tranquil anchorage. So everything is so personalized when you're cruising. And I think a lot of it is because you can go to places that basically other cruisers don't get to. Or even if you go to a place where they've had day trips of cruises, all those tourists leave at 4 o'clock and you have a whole new world in the evening. So just go out and enjoy your own beautiful experiences.
Okay, now we have Kirk saying, this appears mostly to be a sailing experience. Are there any powerboats there?
Yes, there are, particularly in the Western Caribbean, because you get boats going down from Florida. And of course, they all have air conditioning, whereas we use fans and wind scoops. But I think the problem with that, and to be honest, we actually ran a powerboat. It was ironic. We were running an old renovated 12-meter sailing yachts, you know, that went in the Admiral's Cup, 1932, when this guy from Louisiana saw us and said, well, I want to buy a boat, and will you come and work for me? And he wanted a powerboat of all things. I mean, that's one extreme to the other. And we ran it for a season. We bought it for him. Not my cup of tea, because the winds are so great. And you think, you know, you want to harness that wind. And the wind is free. But yes, there are powerboats down there, and they're very roomy, and they have all mod cons on board. So go for it.
Excellent. Now we have Cristobal saying, in what places around the Caribbean would you recommend to store a boat during hurricane season?
Well, if you don't want to go down south to Trinidad or Grenada, your insurance company probably will tell you other boats. Antigua Slipway, for example, in Antigua, which incidentally is why my husband ended up in the Caribbean. He went out to build that. They have a system where you can basically, you have metal straps and they go way down into the ground. The problem with Ivan and why so many boats were damaged, and they were mainly in Grenada at Spice Island, Spice Island, was the domino effect. You know, a big boat at the end of the row of boats that was on the hard started going and everything else went, and there was huge water damage. So they want to keep the boats upright. Jolly Harbour, they actually will dig you a ditch. Jolly Harbour is around the corner in Antigua. There are also places in the other islands you could go, but do make sure that you're really secure. I mean, there are people say, well, go up the inlets with the mangroves, and the mangroves are just great. If you're the only boat in there, or 2 or 3 boats, and you're tied to the mangroves at the end of the inlet, you'll probably be safe and sound. But the other boats further out are the boats that are going to be blown in and damage you. And this has happened time and time again. So the Rio Dulce in Western Caribbean has a really good a hurricane hole, and there are many marinas there you can go into. And there's certainly in the windwards and leewards. The Virgins has some. I believe Puerto Rico does as well. But the insurance company will say whether they're approved or not. Otherwise, you can just sail south. The weather pattern, by the way, of the East and Western Caribbean are different. The Eastern Caribbean, you get those strong trade winds, and they're predominantly in the season the important thing. You get something called the Christmas blow that actually doesn't usually blow at Christmas. It's often, January or February, but it blow like stink for 3 days, and you need to be in just a secure harbor for that. Western Caribbean is really influenced by the lows that everyone tells you come from Canada. When you carry a Canadian ensign, you feel a bit guilty about it. But again, they blow for 3 days. You don't want to be in the offshore atolls. You need to be in a protected anchorage. You need to find a good insurance company and go along with their approval rate. And unfortunately, it's getting harder and harder. But otherwise, go out of the hurricane belt.
Right, and the next question says, are there any islands that are perhaps not quite as safe as others?
The islands, if you go into, say, the British, not the British, the American Virgins, and you go into Charlotte Amalie, you will find that all the cruisers will take taxis in the evening. They have a huge number of cruise ships, and we do represent huge wealth. We may not think we're wealthy. We know we've saved up forever to do this. But those tourists come in, they come in for a day, they splash their monies around. And so unfortunately, you as cruisers, if you go out at night, you're quite vulnerable. So take a taxi. Like any cautious traveler, the world is not all a safe place. And you hear Mexico, someone was attacked at 2 a.m. Well, one girl I remember was wandering around the worst part of town in a bikini. Well, you're asking for trouble. So you talk to local people, you talk to other cruisers, and you say, and there are some places, I mentioned St. Vincent, and there are what they call boat boys. Now, we used to have those in the old days. They were young, and they'd come up and say, what's your boat, Skip? What's your dinghy, Skip? Do you want your laundry done, Skip? And you'd pay them a couple of bucks a day, and then everything would be safe. Well, these people are older now, and they come out, and they're really quite aggressive. And people don't like that, so they avoid that. So that's why we don't tend to go into many places in St. Vincent and tend to go on to Bequia. Venezuela used to be wonderful and isn't now. BBC has wonderful world news that is geared, when you listen to it, to your local area. I mean, we have it for Canada. It's really good at telling you about the political situation. If you have an SSB radio, there are many cruisers nets where you'll get all the cruisers news. So, hey guys, didn't have a good time here, or hey, this is a great place, really recommend it. If you're in a busy city, which is not really in the Caribbean, but this would apply maybe more to the Med, it's always the best to stay in a marina. So you learn along the way, but you need to be a relative cautious cruiser. Your dinghy and your outboard are going to be the most vulnerable. So you need to find a safe place ashore. You need to have a nice chain, lock them to the dock always, take your outboard up at night, or take your dinghy and outboard up at night, have everything locked to everything. So that is the safety. There is actually a safety and security net run by an American at 8:15 every morning. And and just always listen to it. Very often there is a story behind it. It's not quite as it was reported, and make sure you get to know the story too. So don't get freaked out about it, but do lock your boat if you go ashore. You don't probably leave your front door open if you live in the middle of Vancouver and unlocked, and don't your boat either.
All right, so now we have a number of people expressing appreciation for a wonderful presentation, Liza, and I want to thank you very much. It's been delightful to attend, and everybody who has joined us, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you at the VIBS, sponsored by Freedom Marine Yacht Sales in Vancouver. Please be sure to check out all the features we have at VIBS, like, for instance, the info booth. I hope you have a wonderful day at the boat show.
And if I could just add, if you want to find our booth, it's BC Marine Authors, and look under books too. Are we gone?
No, we're still here for you.
Not on air. Sorry,
Yes.
having suddenly seen you. I'm also on the chat for the next hour. So I see there were 4 more questions. So do visit me there, and I'll be delighted to answer your questions there. So everyone, wonderful cruising, Caribbean when you can, but keep dreaming. It's just fantastic.
All right. Thank you, Liza.
Bye.
Bye.